Developing an interesting story. My name is Amber Ledbetter. I am 21 years old and I am the ultimate hobbyist. I read, write, sing, paint, game. I dabble in graphic design and web design, and I manage a Rainbow Six Siege ESL team. Two of the books that I have written are in the top numbers of their genres. For example, Wrath of the Machine is number 5 in Destiny 1. Developing the protagonist is the easiest part of the whole process. The protagonist is generally a bold person with easily recognizable features such as hair or personality. They're often passionate and full of vigor. The protagonist can also be a bad person. However, they're generally the character that the story follows. Not all backstories are the same. You'll commonly come across a protagonist who has lost somebody important to them with the need for revenge, but some simply walk into their role. For example, they've slain the Tau dragon and thus become the town protector. As a writer, I tend to avoid the common protagonist backstory. As a protagonist moves through the story, it's generally a good idea to have them reach a point of clarity in which they grow from their past selves. The longer you take to produce this clarity, the more sluggish the story becomes. But give them this clarity too soon, and the story could end abruptly. Every great protagonist has a strong support system, one that they can simply reach out and get advice or consolation from when they need it. Their support system is also the driving force behind the protagonist because the protagonist could be protecting them or doing something for their sake. Your typical antagonist is the exact opposite of the protagonist, with dark, grungy appearances and personality. As a writer, I typically give this person a mild to strong mental disorder such as schizophrenia or paranoia. I do this to allow myself some writing freedom and to give this character a large spectrum of actions, emotions, and conversation. You'll often see in movies and video games that an antagonist backstory is generally dark and sad, or maybe the exact opposite. Maybe they're just crazy. Most antagonists grew up in terrible households or maybe none at all. Sometimes, because of how they grow up, this drives their power for lust or money. An antagonist usually continues to get away with what they're doing until they run into the protagonist, and that person becomes a wrinkle in their plans. At this point, the antagonist will do everything in their power to eliminate this wrinkle or to iron out their plans. Most antagonists seen in movies and games have the following of a large force behind them, but they only rely on that force to carry out the duties that correspond with their plans. However, when an antagonist doesn't have this force, it generally means that the author made sure the character had a strong force of will and that they were above average intelligence. Making sure that the protagonist of a story is a thorn in the side of the ladder during the length of the story is one of the hardest parts of story writing. The reason why is because you have to align the action of the protagonist with the actions of the antagonist, making it difficult to have a scene where neither of the two cross paths. Deciding the plot of the story is decisive on what both characters are driven on. For the protagonist, it usually means stopping the antagonist all while trying to protect their loved ones. For the antagonist, this means trying to continue their spree of almost anything. That person also needs to be capable of almost anything, making sure that they win most of the time. When it comes down to writing the story, the greatest thing you can do is to put as many descriptors in as possible. You have to keep in mind that when reading a book, it's nothing like watching a movie or playing a game, all because different people have different interpretations of your character and their feelings. In common stories such as Romeo and Juliet or even The Hunger Games, you see the downfall of the antagonist or antagonist. This is a common strategy because everybody loves a happy ending, but some like to see evil rise in the face of good. The audience from the last slide is a prime example of understanding the audience that you're trying to attract to your stories. Having a better overall understanding of your audience allows you to write with more passion towards that specific topic. Building your book begins one chapter at a time. It's always a good thing to have an idea of the direction you want your story to take. It allows you to prepare for each chapter, and it also allows you to make revisions if need be. Always have a rough draft of the next chapter. Like I said before, knowing what your beginning, middle, and end are in a story will allow you to throw in some pretty cool plot twists. Most readers are attracted to your writing if you continue to leave them hanging onto the edge of their seats while reading, such as Captain America using Thor's hammer. Creating conversation is one of the major driving forces in a story, as it allows your readers to know how a character talks or how they feel about another certain character when they speak to them. Knowing these simple things is a difference between a boring, stagnant story and an exciting one. However, not all conversations have to be happy. Being able to stay consistent within a story is a huge factor when it comes to getting and keeping readers hooked with your story. If your story bounces from place to place without any stable driving force, it can become difficult to keep interest or even get people interested in your story. Not all authors do this, but it's generally a good idea to leave the ending of your story up for interpretation. What this means is give yourself some wiggle room with the ending. You could have no intentions of picking the story back up at a later date, but don't be fooled by this notion. Time changes. You could come back to the series. So leave it open, an open idea, something that'll allow you to continue the story. As I've explained many times throughout this slideshow, brainstorming can help with the creative writing process by laying out the events of your story chapter by chapter. This can allow you to make changes if necessary and can help